Communication and conflict resolution are at the heart of a healthy marriage. This episode, Andy and Melody Yarborough join us to talk about that and much more. That's up next on the Healing Place Marriage and Family Podcast.
Welcome to the Healing Place Marriage and Family Podcast, where families are equipped to reflect God's redeeming love. And now, here's your host, Jared Lambert.
Welcome back to the Healing Place Marriage and Family Podcast, where families are equipped to reflect God's redeeming love. I'm your host, Jared Lambert, and on this episode, we continue our series with Andy and Melody Yarborough of the Well Clinic in Prairieville, Louisiana. Welcome back, guys. How you doing today?
Great.
Well,
Thanks
for having us.
All righty. Well, today we're going to be talking about communication and conflict resolution. Like we said in the teaser, this is at the heart of every healthy marriage. A lot of times people come in with financial issues, people come in with roles and responsibility issues, but it's hard to talk about those things if the couple doesn't have a strong base of communication and conflict resolution. One of the things I like encouraging the couples is that, hey, this is natural. It's natural to have conflict in a marriage. And here's what I mean by that. You got a man, you got a woman. Men are wired differently than men. Men are wired differently than women. You probably grew up in a different household. So guess what? For you guys to build unity, there's going to be some conflict about the way you do money, about the way you do leisure, about the way you do all kind of things. So I think we should assume some healthy conflict. But what we're going to be talking about today is if that conflict becomes unhealthy, how do we turn that in the direction of healthy communication and conflict resolution? So let's go ahead and dive right into it. Let's talk about some principles of communication and conflict resolution.
Okay. Probably the first thing about communication is it's really not about who's right or wrong.
Yeah.
Because consider the Titanic. It really didn't matter that some people tried to cover it up, or if someone knew about it and they wish they would have told who was right or who was wrong in that moment. Everybody was going down on that ship.
That's good.
And so, Melody and I talk a lot about just having a core heart belief that my wife is for me.
Yes.
Right.
You got to believe that.
Yeah.
That
your spouse is for you, not against you.
We need to remember that we are the helper, the
Right.
suitable helper that God has provided for us.
Yes. Because sometimes you will be right. Sometimes you will be wrong. And if you realize it's not about arguing your position, really.
That's good.
So the second thing, communication is not about attacking and defending. It often becomes that. We feel attacked, so we end up defending.
Right.
And you get what we think of as the pursuer-distancer patterns, where some person pursues, attacks, the other person distances, or defends. That creates unhealthy marriage patterns. And again, like Mel, if we believe that we're for each other, then we can set that aside and work through it, because ultimately communication is about being heard.
Yeah.
Because once you're heard, you can actually identify what the issue really is and deal with the actual root of the problem.
Do something about it.
So
I usually tell couples that probably about 8 out of 10 of arguments Brandy and I have is because there's a breakdown in communication, or there's a breakdown, like I used a bad filter to hear what she said. And literally that's what it comes down to. When we finally iron it all out, it came down to, I heard something that she didn't say.
Yeah.
I saw her lips moving, but I didn't see what she was saying.
yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes we pay attention more to the words than what's trying to be. We don't hear through what's being communicated because we're not listening well. And you want to check your assumptions.
Yes.
You want to check your assumptions, because if you really believe that your spouse is for you, then you can assume that even if they hurt you, it wasn't intentional. And that if you're for each other, communication is the doorway that maintains healthy relationships, and it really is in some ways part of that healthy soil that allows that tree of marriage to grow.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
So we thought we'd give you something really practical.
Yeah.
We start with communication because you can't jump right into conflict resolution. Because if you try to solve a problem before you understand what it actually is, well, you can imagine what happens.
Yeah.
Right? So communication, being heard. And so what we want to do is give you a what's called the speaker-listener technique, where one person is the speaker, the other person is the listener, and this is called the tango. I learned this from a mentor of mine in grad school, Dr. Jennifer Ripley. She and Dr. Ev Worthington, if anybody's interested, came up with what's called the hope-focused marriage counseling. And so great for pastors, mental health professionals, great resource. But so the speaker-listener technique, more specifically the tango, the speaker is responsible for the T, the A, and the N. The listener is responsible for the G and the O. So let's take a second, walk through this. The T, the speaker wants to tell what happened. Tell what happened. And what you're doing is you're telling observable behavior. And you're only focusing on one thing.
Not 5 ladies and men. Not 5. Got to pick one.
Yes, got to pick one.
That's
Because
important.
what this skill does is it helps you communicate in the moment or shortly after the incident so things don't continue to build up. And the tendency a lot of times, and Mel and I have dealt with this, you get into a discussion or an argument about something and it feels as though the weight of the past and all of the emotions that haven't been appropriately dealt with get dumped into that one moment. And for the listener, that just
Feel
gets
attacked.
Yeah, you feel attacked, you feel overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do that? And so you defend. So you want to tell what happened, focus on observable behavior.
Mm-hmm.
The A is for affected me, ? How did this affect me? And what we will typically say is things like, you made me feel this way, right? So the T, the way this sounds is when you fill in the blank. State the observable behavior. When you, I feel or I felt, not you made me feel. Because when you say you made me feel, you're continuing to give power to someone else, not taking responsibility for your own emotions. It actually limits your ability to heal. Mm-hmm. It limits your ability to pay attention to it and work through it, to understand it. So you want to own that. When you do this or did this or you didn't do this,
I felt.
I feel or I felt, and you give it. It requires the speaker to really pay attention to what's going on inside of them, because you're not just dumping. Mm-hmm. You're really working on communication, because your goal is not to be right here; it's to be heard. And then the N is a nurturing statement, and the reason you want to give a nurturing statement is because these communications can tend to go south pretty quickly, especially if you have patterns of attack, defend, distancer, pursuer, or general desires to be right and wrong. Mm-hmm. So the nurturing statement, but I love you enough to say this, or I know that you're for me. Now the listener, this is the number one rule of the listener. You cannot defend yourself.
Wow. It's hard.
Right.
It is hard. So I have a tendency to say things to Mel like, well, I didn't mean to make you feel that way. It doesn't matter what I meant to do. I did. My behavior or what I didn't do impacted her. So I don't defend myself. I don't tell them that she shouldn't feel a certain way, because whether you should or shouldn't feel an emotion is completely irrelevant. You actually do feel it. So it's better to just pay attention to it.
Recognize it.
Yes. So the getting it, the way that sounds is, so what I'm hearing you say is. So what I'm hearing you say is, and then you just simply reflect back to the best of your ability, not necessarily word for word, doesn't have to be word for word. You just want to reflect back what you're hearing your spouse or whoever else is going to say about what happened and how they're feeling. And then the O is you want to observe. And this is nonverbal, primarily nonverbal behaviors. So if I'm the listener and I'm reflecting something back to her, but she's shaking her head with her arms crossed, what do you think that communicates? This conversation is not going very well. And I've worked with couples before. One particular couple I worked with years ago, been married for almost 15 years, the husband did not want to be in my office. He did not want to do the tango. Highly resistant. And I said, look, brother, if just do this one time. If you don't want to come back, don't come back. Let's just try it. He said, okay. He was the listener. The wife did a good job of delivering it. He did a really good job of, getting it where she said she felt heard. And then I said, well, observe. What do you see nonverbally? He said, well, she's angry. And she looks up from the ground. I said, well, that's an observation. I mean, that's a conclusion. I said, what are you observing in her? He says, and she's confused. Well, every time she looks down at the ground and her eyebrows are furrowed, she's angry. She said, no, I'm not being angry. I'm just thinking about what you said. And the light bulb went off. The light bulb went off for him. For almost 15 years, he had been thinking she was angry and responding to her as if she was angry. That had not gone.
Believed the lie.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. That had not gone well for them in their marriage. Making those assumptions and operating out of them, which is why those observations are so important.
And here's why verbalizing is so important. There's a lot of time that I've experienced something between me and my wife, and in my mind, I perceived it and thought of it one way, but when I verbalize it, I recognize the ridiculousness of it. So there's a difference in how you replay something or experience and replay something in your mind, but then you verbalize it, and it's almost like you have a different set of ears listening, and you're able to see the deception and the lies or the story you're telling yourself. So this is why communication, an exercise like this is so valuable. Yeah. Not only for you as a couple, but for you as an individual to verbalize how you experience that, and then to hear how you're explaining it to yourself. That's how I found that valuable for myself.
And the thing that I liked, you recognized, it felt like, man, I'm really, there's something about this. I'm making a bigger deal out of what's really going on inside of me. Mm-hmm. It helps you do that. Oftentimes what I find though is that the listener does that. They'll say, well, that's just ridiculous. And what that will end up doing is invalidating the experience of the speaker. And as soon as someone feels invalidated, they start to defend or attack. So you have just shut the process of communication down by invalidating them. When in fact, if you did this technique, you didn't defend yourself, you just got it, the speaker feels heard, and now has both the psychological energy they're not using to defend or attack anymore. They're using it to communicate and resolve this issue. Now both of you are actually moving in the right direction because you feel validated in the process.
Okay, so now we understand tango. The speaker and the listener tell what happened, how it affected me, nurturing statement, the getting it, and the observation. Give us an example. So how do you work with couples in order to help build, improve, and enrich their communication and conflict resolution?
I want to say something before we go into like a role play of the tango. A dear friend of mine, Angie Stockstill, has mentioned before to myself and a group of women that I was in the room, this halt. You need to ask yourself 4 questions. Halt before you engage in conflict resolution. And HALT stands for this. I know we're dumping a lot of acronyms on y'all today between tango and HALT, but
get your pens and papers out, and I'll say that next.
That's right. HALT stands for hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Are you hungry, or is your husband hungry? Do you need to feed yourself a meal or feed him a meal? Are you angry? Don't let anger from an outside situation like Andy referred to earlier, don't let all these emotions kind of pile up and dump in this one instance. Lonely or tired? Ask those 4 questions. If there's a yes to any one of them, pause and engage later.
So that's a great illustration of last episode about the biosocial, psychological,
biopsychosocial-spiritual, absolutely.
So, hey, let's see if anything's going on biologically. His brother hungry. His brother needs a sandwich.
Yeah. Yes.
You got it.
Excellent. Okay, so give us an example. let us. How do you work with couples to build and improve communication and conflict resolution?
All right, so we start with communication, right? And so I'm going to be the guinea pig here. We're going to talk about something that I've done that I need to handle. Mel's going to talk to me about it. And so let's assume that we've now practiced HALT. We're not hungry, we're not angry, lonely or tired. And Mel comes to me because I've done something that's hurt her.
Okay. Andy, when you're on your phone and I'm talking to you, I feel like I'm not important. But I know you love me and you don't want to make me feel that way.
Ooh, okay. So what I'm hearing you say is when you're trying to talk to me and I'm on my phone, it makes you feel like I don't care about you and you're not important to me?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So and for our listeners, I'm just going to observe, like right now you're smiling, you're looking at me. Like I feel like this conversation is going well and you feel like I've heard you. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And there it is. It literally can be that simple because it doesn't have to be this long drawn out process. It's just something that helps you communicate what's going on in that moment.
Let me give you a dysfunctional example, and maybe you can help break it down. So, working with a couple, and we were doing an exercise similar, and her statement was, honey, I need, when you get home from work, I would like help with getting the dinner ready, getting the kids settled. If you would do that for me, I would not feel so anxious and overworked when I get home.
That was our other example.
His response was, oh, so it's not good enough that I provide for the home. I'm not good enough. And it was downhill from there. So break that down for us, a dysfunctional. I mean, you guys did a beautiful, perfect example. I just don't have a lot of experience with that.
So that's the way, and that's the way it's supposed to look. So you get a model for, but what happens in this case, and we don't know these people, but one, she tried to give a solution without allowing time to be heard herself. And so it really, if you think about what's really going on there is she feels exhausted. And when he comes home and doesn't help, she feels like there's a chance that she feels like he doesn't care. There's a chance. So really she has to take a step back and look at what's really going on in her when he comes home. What is it that he's not doing or that he is doing that I'm responding to, and how can I take responsibility? The other thing is she dumped responsibility on him. She didn't take responsibility for her own emotion. And if you don't take responsibility for your emotion, you don't really have the ability to do something about it. So when you come home and you don't help, I feel neglected and exhausted. But I know that you care about me because you provide for us. You're working hard for us. I just need to communicate that to you. Gotcha. And that would be an example. He immediately defended himself and didn't stop for a moment and validate what may have been going on with her, because there's a good chance that he wants her to feel validated, but he's exhausted. And so if validation is the important part in this, and we dive into like conflict resolution, it may be that the common issue is validation and both of them being heard. So maybe he comes home and for 10 minutes, he just takes a break, rests, and then engages the family so that he has the energy that he needs to do it.
Mm.
Okay, well that speaks to, and I misspoke earlier about communication and conflict resolution. Let's touch on conflict resolution. What are some important points to understand about conflict resolution in marriage?
So first step is
setting a time and a place, and that's where HALT truly comes in, is alleviating those variables before you engage in tango.
Yeah, so you want the best environment possible, and that's not just the environment outside of you, but we're talking about your mind and your emotions. Make sure, you're not too stirred up before.
Right. And it's important to schedule a time. Andy and I have said, there are certain days that we have a lot more going on than others. And we'll say, you know what, if there's something really pressing and I know my husband's schedule and I know that I'm going to need his undivided attention, it's in my best interest to hold off and discuss that at a later time. And I can ask him, when's a good time for us to talk about something? When's a good time? I think scheduling is really important.
Right.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because it is really, she has done that in our marriage, and it has been really helpful for me to be present, to listen more effectively, and not be exhausted. So you set the time and the place, then you really want to define what's actually going on. And that may not be the behavior. So you want to be heard, and it's a behavior that's actually triggering some of the issues. But what's really motivating the hurt or the pain? And so you want to evaluate the common interests or the common values that you both can agree on to use to move towards resolving this conflict. So let's take the example of Melody and me. So Mel, when you think about me being on the phone, what do you think is a common value or common interest that we could agree on that's driving your frustration? What value is being violated?
I don't feel like I'm being heard.
Okay, so when I'm on my phone and I'm doing that, it's not the fact that I'm actually on my phone, because I could get all mad and say, well, fine, I'm never going to do my phone again. And that actually makes it worse, right?
Check my email in your presence.
Right.
Right.
So it's not that I'm on my phone. It's that you just want to feel heard.
Right. I feel like there's so many distractions with our kids. They get distracted easily. Probably when I have an adult conversation, I want some eye contact, some good eye contact.
Brandy always uses the word connection.
Yes, absolutely.
We need to connect.
Yes.
Yeah. And again, guys, you need to learn your wife's definition of connection, because you probably have a different definition.
Amen.
So yeah, it's just important to connect. Like you said, it wasn't important that you were on the phone. It was important that you weren't she didn't feel connected with you during that conversation.
Yes. And what got us to that point was the tango and her being able to recognize when he's doing this, what's going on in me.
I don't feel important.
Yeah.
In the moment.
So, all right. So the interest for you then, Mel, is, and I agree with you, it's important to be heard, to be validated and heard. Now, we have the value that sets us up for the actual conflict resolution. So what you have to do then, so it's set a time and a place, just define the problem or the issue by using that evaluating interests or values. The third thing is you have to ask, how do you each contribute to the problem?
Mm-hmm.
How do you each contribute? And this makes a lot of people upset, because the common response is, how do I contribute to that? He's the one coming in on his phone all the time. Yeah. But the marriage family is a system.
We all play a role.
Mm-hmm. Blame will destroy any possibility of healthy communication and conflict resolution. Now, if everybody is taking responsibility for their part in the system, then the system gets corrected. And that's the hell. It's not that when blame is taken out and everybody goes, okay, how am I contributing to this? I'm not being heard. He's coming in. What's going on? So part of the way I'm contributing is I've taken a lot of stuff off my phone, actually. A lot of apps.
No social media.
I don't have social media on my phone. And it's saved me so much time. Normally what I'm checking is a work text or an email. And it's normally when I'm walking in the door. So what I had to do is realize, man, when I walk in the door, my work phone goes down, right? And eye contact. When my wife is talking to me, I make eye contact with her because for me, she knows I'm listening if I'm looking at her. Mm-hmm. So that's how I can take. So Mel, if I put my phone down, maybe I can check it later after the kids have gone to bed. I've got maybe 5 minutes during the day at the end of the night where I'm able to check it, or just I can do that in the mornings. I can do a better job of maintaining that in the mornings. Would that be helpful for you? And I'm making eye contact. Would that be helpful for you to feel heard?
Yes.
Awesome. So how are you contributing to the issue?
I knew you'd ask. So I think it points back to what I said earlier. Recognizing, observing nonverbal cues. If you look stressed on your phone, I'm thinking, okay, something must be going down, and it's not a great time to try to engage in a pretty weighty conversation right now. So taking responsibility for my timing and just asking you, hey, can we talk about something right now? Do you have a minute for us to talk through this?
Yep. Create the expectation. That way we don't feel blindsided, and you need time to prepare yourself for this this discussion.
Right.
Because if it's just about the behavior, there are those rare times where someone is suicidal. And I've gotten a call in my work, and so I'm thinking, right. So you're looking at big picture. Mm-hmm. So set a time and a place, define the problem by using the evaluating interests technique. How do you each contribute to the problem? You also want to think about past attempts to resolve the issue that were not successful.
Right. And here's what I find. People come in with communication problems, conflict resolution problems, and they think that one session of counseling is going to fix their problem.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So hey, if you guys are struggling in an area, it's going to take time to improve it.
Right.
So it's going to take time to figure, especially if you're newly married, or maybe if you've spent the life of the marriage not communicating in conflict and resolution well, you're going to try some things that won't work. You have to allow yourself to make those mistakes. You have to allow your spouse to make those mistakes and use them as learning opportunities, not as more ammunition for division.
Right.
That's a great point.
People oftentimes, I know for Andy, they come in and he's like their last hope. So they come in desperate and they want him to fix, like you said, a decade's worth of improper communication day one. But it is a process. It takes time.
So don't be surprised if there's more than one attempt to fix a problem.
Exactly.
I think that's a good way to set yourself up for failure if you think the first try on everything is going to succeed.
Yes.
Especially when you're working as husband and wife.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
What are some other things?
And you can't, let me say this too, but you can't be governed by your emotion in the middle of this. You've got to be governed by the principle and the value of communication. Because even when you forgive someone, sometimes the emotion lingers because your soul heals like a burn wound or a cut, right? If somebody accidentally shot me in the arm, I could forgive them, but I still have to heal from that gunshot wound. It's the same way in marriage. Psychologically, if I hurt Mel or she hurts me, I can forgive her, but sometimes that emotion doesn't go away immediately. I've got to heal, and that's okay. And so realizing that you may still be a little frustrated or wounded or hurt, but you moving towards your spouse, not against or away, is the way to actually handle that in a healthier way. And so you kind of following up with what Jared said, you may have emotions that are kind of all over the place, but if you've halted, you're okay. You recognize those things are there, and you're able to do this in an effective way. You're not letting any wound govern your interaction process, you're letting these values do it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so with the last couple minutes, how else do we, what are some other steps we can take in resolving conflict?
So once you've identified attempts that weren't successful, like avoiding the issue, you want to brainstorm as many possible solutions as you can. Agree on one of them. Put that thing into motion. Set up another time to get together and talk about it. If it works, keep going. If it doesn't work, try another solution. And then reward each other when you find something that really works and is sustainable.
That's good.
Yeah. Yeah, and here's the importance of conflict resolution. This is what needs to be our driver and motivation for conflict resolution. We need to understand that it's not good that we are alone. I mean, I think it's the basic biblical marriage principle. It is not good that Adam was alone. So you need that helper that God has provided for you. And the only way to build unity and to work as each other's helper is to communicate and to resolve conflicts together in unity. So that's why it's important to brainstorm, to discuss and evaluate the possible solutions. Because if I'm the one trying to resolve all these issues by myself, then I'm actually ignoring the very gift that God created for me to help me as a husband. And the same thing vice versa for the wife. So communication and conflict resolution is definitely important. And this encouragement that we got from you guys today is definitely some good encouragement to help people build and improve in their conflict resolution.
And you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah.
Come see Jared.
Good point.
Come talk
true.
to Jared.
Yeah.
Find accountability.
Yeah.
Find other brothers and sisters.
Yeah,
Come
again,
see us.
Yeah. Like we talked about in the first episode, there are layers. You want to be planted in church. You want to be plugged into a small group. You want to have community, fellowship, or whatever vernacular, your church uses, but you want to be in fellowship. You want to be in community with people. I verified this with Andy. As I was learning about lay counseling, I actually read that most professional counselors will tell you that for the most part, you may not need professional counseling. Maybe a $2 cup of coffee with a friend, with somebody who loves you, is really the solution to a majority of our issues.
Yeah.
But if we don't have that connection, that festers and grows into something where you will need professional counseling. So, yeah, you're right. Don't do this alone. Well, it was great having you guys. We appreciate you guys joining us.
Thank you for having us.
I think this is going to be encouraging and some good information for our listeners. So, all right, that's all the time we have for this episode on communication and conflict resolution. Again, we're in the middle of a series with Andy and Melody Yarborough of the Well Clinic in Prairieville, Louisiana. That'll do it for this episode. We'll see you next time on the Healing Place Marriage and Family Podcast.
Thank you for joining us for today's podcast. For more information about Healing Place Church, visit us at healingplacechurch.org. For more podcast episodes, subscribe to the Healing Place Marriage and Family Podcast on iTunes or the podcast server for your device.